Hello, everybody, and welcome to Barkley Sound. We are here on the west coast of Vancouver Island in the traditional territory of the Huu-ay-aht First Nation. My name is Kelly, and I am an educator at the Bamfield Marine Sciences Centre, or BMSC for short, and we are a not-for-profit registered Canadian charity. We're also a shared campus of 5 different universities, which are the University of Victoria, UBC, Simon Fraser University, the University of Alberta, and the University of Calgary. For almost 50 years, we've been hosting researchers who come from all over the world to study here. We also run university courses and offer field trips for school groups. So we're here aboard a boat, and there is a team of people helping me out today. But before I introduce them to you, I'd love it if you could participate in this show a little bit as well. And so you can use the chat or the comments on YouTube to let me know where you're watching from today. I'd love to hear that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to introduce my team here on the boat. So my name is Kelly, but there's actually 3 other people helping me out here today. Let's take a look. Okay, so here on the boat, this is Owen waving at you. Owen is our deckhand today, and he'll be helping us to deploy some instruments here a little bit later on. Thanks, Owen. And behind Owen is Phil. Phil is our tech hand, as I like to call him. Look at his setup back here. We've got all this technology set up on our boat. It's very complicated and very exciting that we're able to bring you this lesson live from Barkley Sound. And the other member of our team right over here, this is Skipper Dave. So he is the captain of our vessel, and he's also keeping us safe out here on the water and helping out today as well. So between the 3 of us, the 4 of us, we are bringing you the Green Crab Patrol. I'm going to turn things over to Phil momentarily so that he can give you an orientation of where we're located on a map.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Hi, everyone. So just to go through where people are calling in from, or viewing from, rather, we got Richmond, Comox, Kelowna, Edmonton, Qualicum Secondary, and Qualicum Beach. Someone from Canada, welcome. Victoria, Port Moody, Kelowna, more Victoria, the foothills of Alberta, Terrace, people all over the place. Dorothy says hi, Owen. There you go. Shout out. Also, you folks watching on YouTube, you can let us know. There's a little bit of delay between the 2 videos, but we'll catch up as the show continues. See, Krista calling from the traditional unceded territory of La Loquiat First Nation in Tofino. Hi, Krista. The Sicamous. Someone in Bamfield. Hey, Luke. Calgary. Anyway, a whole bunch of people. So let's give you an idea of where we are currently. Usually we're at the Science Center, but today it's pretty exciting. We are in the middle of, well, we're in Barkley Sound. We're actually out on a boat. It's pretty cool. We haven't done this as remotely as we have today. So let me bring this up here. Share with you my Google Earth screen. And depending where you're from, so we are on Vancouver Island. And I'll slowly zoom in here. So if you've been to Bamfield before, people usually come across from Vancouver over to Nanaimo, make their way to Port Alberni, and then either come by boat or the logging road all the way to Bamfield. We are on the edge of Barkley Sound. Ucluelet is kind of our closest neighbor. And down here, well, I'll show you where the Science Center is. So usually our activities are happening right from the Marine Science Center. We're doing out on the docks or out in beaches or in boats nearby. But today we hopped in a boat and came down Trevor Channel over to Sarita Bay. Need to find our spot here. Oh, there's Sarita Bay right there. And we're over by, what's the name of the island again, Dave? Santa Maria Island. So this island right here, and we are right here in this spot, right there. And just let me share with you how we got here. So we're in our stickleback heading out of the harbor. Beautiful day out here, nice and sunny. It wasn't that long of a trip, maybe 15 minutes. That was quite a fast boat ride. And voila, on location. Yes, that was quite fast. All right, back to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Phil. We did not see any whales on our journey today, but that we'll keep our eyes open and you never know what could happen. So we are down here in Sarita Bay, just down the way from Bamfield, and we are located in the traditional territory of the Huayet First Nation. And I'm not sure if any of our Huayet members have joined, so we'll maybe come back to that afterwards. But I do want to say a few things about this location. Oh, okay. Trevor from Huayet First Nation has joined, and we would love to introduce the location of Sarita Bay and maybe learn a little bit about why it is important to the Huayet people. So if Trevor could unmute and say hello to us, that would be welcome.
I can definitely do that. Thank you, Phil and team here for having me on, and great to be a part of it. I think my my brother Ed Johnson, who is also on council, was planned to be here, so I got thrown into the mix. But in either case, Uklama Hiaksit Huayeta. My name's Trevor Coots. I'm an elected member of the Executive Council for the Huayet First Nations. I descend from the House of Apunaset, and you guys are in the heart of Huayet territory. Santa Maria Island, where Phil just showed you guys, is the heart of where Huayet peoples were and have been since time immemorial. So it's an amazing place to be. I know back in the day, from the Phil shot, it looks it looks very green, but before you'd see houses there, and you'd actually see old fishing trawlers in there, were ocean-going people and fishermen, and that place is and still is immensely important to our fisheries as Huayet peoples. One of our most highest priorities have always been our ability to access our resources, which is fish. Salmon is a huge part of our diet. And where you guys are at, there's a lot of salmon that come through the Sarita watershed up into Namukamis Bay, is what we call it, into Sarita River and spawn there. So it's a significant area. Great to see you guys out there. I believe you guys are doing things on green crab today. Is that correct? Awesome. I know that's an important topic there. I know green crab is an invasive species, so it would be great to hear. Unfortunately, I only actually have about 5-10 minutes to be on with you guys today, so just happy to come on, say hello from Huayet, from our Tai Hatwith Cletion. So everybody watching, Tai Hatwith is our hereditary chief, and our hereditary chief's name is Cletion. And so definitely extending his arms to you guys and saying hello and welcome to his territory, and enjoy the presentation here. It's amazing to see the technology come to where it is. Hard to believe that you can be live streaming from Namukamis Bay. So thank you again, and best wishes.
Thank you so much, Trevor. It's wonderful to hear from you today, and too bad that you couldn't actually be out on the boat with us as part of this green crab patrol. So that is the lesson of the day, the green crab patrol. That's why you guys are here on board this boat known as the Stickleback, the BMSC research vessel called the Stickleback. So we're here to investigate the invasive European green crab and what it might be doing in this part of Sarita Bay. And as Trevor mentioned, this is really important habitat for salmon and so many other species here in Sarita Bay. So if we have green crabs in our area, that's going to be a problem. So I'll ask you a question. Why do you think green crabs are a bad thing to have around? It turns out they're one of the 10 most unwanted species in the world. So what's so bad about green crabs? I'll leave that for you guys to answer in the chat. And while you're thinking about that, I'll mention really briefly just the difference between an invasive species and an introduced species, because it turns out that species get moved from one place to another all the time, sometimes through natural phenomena, maybe in the ocean at least, they catch a ride on ocean currents and drift somewhere new, or on land, maybe they hitch a ride on another animals, they stick together and get transported to new places. But it's also possible that species get introduced from human causes. And so humans can move a species from one location to a next, and that can maybe be a problem, maybe not. Sometimes the new species, when it gets settled, it just it lives and it is able to survive, but it doesn't actually become a problem. Whereas an invasive species, it's a problem. It usually uses up more resources than the native species, or maybe it reproduces faster or whatever it is. But for various reasons, an invasive species, it takes over in its new habitat. And I've seen some answers coming up on the screen, but maybe Phil, you might need to help me out here, because I think I missed most of them about why are green crabs so bad.
Yeah, no problem. Looks like we have like 55 participants just in the Zoom show, and I'm seeing another 30 or so on YouTube. So let me just touch back on. Hopefully, we can get to a lot of your things, a lot of your comments. So as far as the problems are, there are many of them. They come in groups. They eat stuff that they shouldn't. They damage the eelgrass beds. They're messing with the ecosystems. They destroy eelgrass. They're decimating mollusks in the area. They could eat all the food so that the original wildlife could die out. Let me see. They're bad because they want to take your cookies. Maybe they'll take your cookies too.
I bet they
Yes.
would if you gave them a chance.
Thank you, Graham. If it's more of a generalist than the native species, then it will push out the local populations due to competing resources.
Wow, we have some smart
Yeah,
viewers here today.
Great answers.
All right, and one more request for Phil, actually. I'm wondering if you can pull up a little video just to show us what a green crab actually looks like, so our viewers know what we're searching for here today. And so you'll see here in just a moment that they are generally green, although that's not always the case. They do come in a variety of colors. And so usually the top side is kind of a greenish gray color, but underneath they might be more yellow or orange, and even bits of red on them is pretty typical. And when you are observing their carapace, or their shell is known as the carapace, it has a number of kind of spiky bits, or teeth as they're known, on the front edge of the shell where the eyes are located. There's lots of spikes there. So by counting the number of spikes, you can actually determine if you're looking at a green crab or if it's a different species of crab instead. And as many of you brought up in your answers, green crabs are very, very hungry. They will eat anything. They're definitely generalist feeders because they have no particular food source. They'll eat whatever they can find. So here, one is eating a piece of fish, but literally they will eat whatever food that they can locate, and they're not picky at all. So whether it's fish or shellfish or seaweed, or even, this is the crazy part, even other green crabs, they will eat their own species. They're that hungry all the time. So that's an interesting one for the animal kingdom. Anyway, so we're out here on the boat in Sarita Bay, and the whole point is that we're about to attempt to capture some green crabs here today. And we have a couple different methods for doing so. So here's where I'm going to call upon my teammates, Owen and Dave, to help me out, because one of the ways that we're going to attempt to catch some green crabs is by using a trap. So just adjacent to the boat here, we have a crab trap that's been down in the water. And yeah, we're ready to haul this in and see what we've got. I'm gonna maybe get out of the way here for you guys to see this trap coming aboard. And we will find out what is in our trap. It's like Deadliest Catch, you guys. I see some things inside our trap. What color are these crabs? These look like red crabs to me, not green crabs. Indeed. So I think we have a different species of crab on the go here. These are not the European green crab. These are known as the red rock crab. Look at that crab. It's beautiful. There's a question of, can I explain the kind of trap that I used and why? So this is actually a commercial crab trap, but it's been modified because normally the crab trap would just be the steel mesh, but we've added a very finer plastic mesh to our trap in order to catch the smaller green crabs. Green crabs are actually a smaller species than these red rock crabs. And so we needed a more specialized trap for catching them. And in the very center of the trap, there was some bait, but the crabs have actually managed to get into the bait pouch and pull the bait out. So they've been snacking on a piece of fish in there for the last little while. Oh, this one is missing one of its helipeds, its claws. But this looks like a pretty fearsome crab. I think Owen needs to be really careful not to get his fingers stuck into the claw of that crab, because it will definitely try to pinch him. And so we are, yes, somebody else is using modified commercial prawn traps for catching green crabs. And that would also work really well because the mesh size would be smaller than on a commercial crab trap. So that's a great comment. All right, so there's a couple of things that we can do with these red rock crabs. First, I'll teach you how to identify them as a red rock crab. One of the key features is the tips of those claws. I don't want to get my fingers in there too close, but the tips of the claws are black on a red rock crab. And they have a really interesting feature of why they are black. It comes from actually iron that the crabs get from ingesting their prey. So it turns out the blood of their prey contains iron, and then the red rock crabs will incorporate that iron into the tips of their claws to make them stronger at crunching open shells. So that sounds like they're a pretty scary crab. So why would a green crab be such a problem when all of these red rock crabs are having iron tipped claws, basically? And Phil, maybe you can help me out here. There's a couple of comments that have been popping up on the screen that I missed. And let's maybe throw some of these crabs back.
Yeah, question was, well, how big do the green crab get?
Aha, that's a really good question. The green crabs are smaller than a red rock, and so the carapace width of a green crab is only about 10 centimeters across. So if I compare this one that Owen's got in his hand here, this crab, a green crab carapace would only be about the width of my hand across at max size. That's about 10 centimeters. So the red rocks get bigger. Another question, Phil?
Sure. Would the red rock crab have eaten any of the green crab if they happened to get into the trap?
It is possible, yes. Yes, it is possible. And so another feature that you guys can do, if say you're catching crabs in a trap and you're not sure what species you've found, we have another tool that can help us to identify the crabs. So I would actually like to call on Phil maybe to help us out with using iNaturalist to figure out what species of crab we're looking before. And I just saw a question of how many teeth are on a green crab's shell. In between the eyes of a green crab, there are 3 teeth. And then on the outside of each eye, there are 5 more. So 5 teeth on the outside, 3 in the middle between the 2 eyes.
Okay, so I'm going to mute my mic and switch over to the tablet here.
Great. And so we're going to use an app to help identify the species, and Phil's screen sharing here. Okay, so you guys, anybody can use this app. It's called iNaturalist, or iNat for short, and it's a way to catalog species diversity, but you can use it anywhere. It doesn't matter if you're on the ocean or in the city or what. All you need to do is take a picture of the animal. So use our camera to just take a picture of this crab, maybe take one of the other side too. You can take multiple pictures. And then once you've uploaded your photos to the app, it will actually suggest some species that this might be based on your photo. So it uses a little bit of AI to determine what you might be looking at, what you might have a picture of here. And so once you input your photo, iNaturalist will suggest some potential species that you might be able to see. In our case, we're pretty sure that these are red rock crabs. And so we will input that as our species. We'll just say, yes, that's a red rock crab, and see what happens. It'll recognize it in just a moment when we enter red rock crab. There it is. The scientific name is Cancer productus. Oh, we didn't actually finish the observation. We have to go back and edit that one a little bit more. Anyway, so you can also input your the coordinates of where you found that species and other information about it, and it gets tagged to the photo. Yeah, we'll go back to it in a little bit. But this is something that you as viewers can be using at home as well. If you already have the app, that's great. You can take a screenshot throughout this show and be cataloging your own observations of the things that we're about to see on this lesson. Or if you don't have the app yet, that's okay. You can always download it later and you can make observations even in your own backyard. So it doesn't matter where you live, you can use iNaturalist to find different species. And it's great if you don't know what species you're looking at, then you can use iNaturalist to help you identify it. The great part is that when your submission goes into iNaturalist, it gets observed by other members of the iNat community. So whether they're scientists or whether they're people that just know a lot about that species, they look at your observation. It's like social media, and they can confirm whether the species you've seen is in fact the thing you said it was, or if maybe it's something different. So a couple days from now, or maybe later today, somebody will look at our observation of that red rock crab and they will say, yes, that is a red rock crab, or maybe no, it's not, and give us a better suggestion of what species that might be. And this is really helpful for scientists to be able to track the location of species in the world. And we discovered something very interesting when we were learning about green crabs and looked at iNaturalist to discover who else has seen green crabs in Barkley Sound. Turns out there's not very many of them. So in all of Barkley Sound, which is a pretty wide area, there are only 7 species or 7 different occasions where somebody has input green crabs into iNaturalist. And so I think we can pull up a map actually of that. Is that ready to go, Phil? Let's take a look at the map of Barkley Sound, but with flags on the locations where green crabs have been found.
Okay, so here we have, there's one close to Bamfield, that little red spot right there. There's a green crab sighting. And kind of on the edge of the Broken Group Islands there. And then a whole bunch up Pipestem Inlet right there. And is this Effingham Inlet? I think that's Effingham Inlet there. Yeah, so not a ton. Oh, more up north over by Tofino, so a whole bunch more. So yeah, you can go to iNaturalist.org and it'll show you all kinds of maps and everything of where your species was seen. And once we have our information uploaded, we'll see ours over by Sarita Bay. As you know, we didn't have one. Never mind. Today we had red rock crab, so the rock crab will show up at Sarita Bay.
But that's a really good point that you just brought up, Phil. There are no observations of green crabs in Sarita Bay at this point. So we're surveying in a new spot. And anecdotally or word of mouth, I've heard that green crabs have been spotted here, but those observations were not put into iNaturalist. So we don't actually have a picture or confirmed proof that the green crabs were here. And so to help us look around, since we didn't catch any in our traps today, we have another tool that is so cool that we want to show you how we're using to observe the underwater environment in search of the European green crabs. Let me turn my camera around again just to show you. We have a fabulous tool called the ROV. Here we go. All right, take a look at this little thing. This little green thing doesn't look that exciting at first glance, but this thing is like a little robot. And on the front of the robot, Dave, can you turn it around for me so I can see the front of it? Yeah. It has a camera right there on the front. So when we put this little robot into the water, we can drive it around and use that camera. You on Zoom can watch through the eyes of this little robot and see what's underwater. Now, it's not actually a robot because Owen is driving this thing. And in here, he has a specially constructed box with his control system inside the box. It's like a joystick. So if you're really good at video games, then you would be really good at driving this ROV. So inside here, he's got the controls and a little viewing screen so he can see what's going on underwater. And then the ROV will be driving around right here in Sarita Bay. So should we put it in the water? Let's do it.
Hey, Kelly, while that's going on, a couple questions coming over from YouTube. Let's see. Where are green crabs originally from?
Aha, great question. So green crabs, as you might suspect, the green crabs being called European green crabs are from Europe. But they were introduced into North America originally on the east coast of North America, on the east coast of Canada in the 1800s, so quite a long time ago now. They came over in ships from Asia, from Europe, but they have only more recently been introduced to the west coast of Canada here in the kind of mid 1900s, again introduced by humans into our area.
And how about do we know how many might be around Canada?
Ooh, I don't actually know the answer to that one. What is the total population of green crabs in Canada? No,
Yeah,
but
that's
I
a
do
tough
know
one.
there's a lot of them on the east coast of Canada, and they're starting to spread on the west coast as well. You could probably check the iNaturalist sightings to find out how many there are. Okay, we're starting to get some footage from our ROV now. This is real time underwater. There's a question. What do you do if you catch a green crab? Do you destroy it? Good point. So if you catch a green crab or something that you suspect is a green crab, always make sure that it is in fact a green crab. And it's a good idea to take photos of it, such as for iNaturalist. There's no recommendation that you do destroy it, but you should report that you found one to the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. So report your green crab sightings, and then they can investigate if was that really a green crab that you saw, and they can do some more surveys to actually figure out, is there a population of green crabs in that area? Okay, so underwater here, we have eelgrass. This is an eelgrass bed underwater. All that grassy stuff is actually a very important habitat underwater. This eelgrass bed is like a nursery for so many different kinds of fish and invertebrates that need a home. They need shelter, and the blades of this eelgrass is the perfect environment for them to live. That includes salmon. So if you think back to the beginning where we learned that salmon were really important to the Huu-ay-aht people as a food source, baby salmon will spend quite a lot of their time finding refuge in an eelgrass bed and hiding so that they have a chance to grow up into bigger salmon. There was another question on the screen there that I just missed, Phil. We are also seeing some fish.
Oh, what do we feel is the impact on the habitat that the ROV may have?
Oh, good point. We do have to be very careful with our ROV here today because there were several little propellers on the ROV, and we really do not want to get those propellers trapped in the eelgrass. So Owen's being really careful to drive just a little bit above the surface of the eelgrass so you can still see it, but he's not putting the ROV right down inside the eelgrass because we don't want to chew it up. You also see there the bottom is kind of sedimenty. That is typical for eelgrass habitat, and that's one of the other features of why eelgrass grows here, and one of the benefits that it has. The roots or rhizomes of the eelgrass tend to stabilize the sediment, so they grow. This plant grows into kind of sandy or muddy bottom ocean environments, and the roots help to retain the sand and sediment in that location so it doesn't just get washed away. So there's that benefit of having eelgrass here, besides just being habitat. Okay, I think I'm missing some more questions too. What is the scientific name of the green crab? It is called Carcinus manus. And so Carcinus manus is the scientific name for the green crab. And yes, I have actually found green crabs before, although I will admit not at this location. And that's why we're surveying here, because we want to be able to track if green crabs are expanding into new territory or not. So that's why we decided to come down to Sarita Bay and investigate this eelgrass bed. If there were green crabs in this location, and there could be, we might see the eelgrass itself actually getting snipped off or pinched by the claws of the crabs. They just come along and just pinch off the blades of eelgrass and essentially destroy that habitat. So it would definitely be a problem for the eelgrass itself, but also for the other species that we're going to be seeing here in this environment. So we're just looking around. If we were doing an official survey, we would be following a transect, but right now we're just having a look. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, another question from YouTube. What would you say is the green crab's main prey?
The green crabs have a lot of different kinds of prey. That's one of the scary things about them. They can eat all kinds of different things. So they will eat shellfish, like oysters, for instance, but they will also eat fish or mollusks, like snails or chitons, or basically whatever they can find. They're very hungry for all different species. We have a crab of some kind, but it's not moving. So we're wondering if maybe that crab it's maybe just the molt of a crab. It could be a crab shell and not an actual living crab. It doesn't look to me like a green crab either way. You guys see that? You could take a screenshot of this if you want to use iNat, and you could try and identify this species that way. I think it's a red rock crab, but it could just be a molt. Yeah, it could be dead too, but oftentimes when you find a crab shell, say on the beach, probably half of the time it's not actually from a dead crab, it's just the exoskeleton that the crab has had to shed its skeleton in order to grow bigger. And that's just the natural way that green crabs do that over time. There's a lot of comments coming through. Phil, can you help me out with some of those?
Yeah, so basically someone's wondering why would the rock crab be in this kind of sandy eelgrass environment? And yeah, rock crab are found everywhere but they go to where there could be easy prey. They'll eat mollusks and other shellfish, which could be found around the eelgrass bed. It also adds nice spots to burrow and hide. They'll hide sometimes and then pop out and grab things with their large claws. And Kelly, what would you say is a green crab's predator if it were to have a predator?
That's one of the problems with invasive species. Because they've been moved into a new location, they often don't have very many predators. And that's part of the reason why their population is growing so rapidly. But I did mention that sometimes green crabs will eat each other, which is wild. Normally, it would be the adult green crabs that would feed on the younger green crabs. So that actually could help to keep their population in check a little bit, but that's a pretty extreme example of a predator relationship. There could be other things that eat them, maybe birds or certain types of birds, maybe, but again, because it's not a native crab to this area, they might not have learned that that's a food source that they could tap into. I should mention though that humans could eat green crabs. We generally don't though, and it's mostly just due to their small size. They're not usually something that we look at and say, yeah, I'm going to eat that. But they're not poisonous, and we could be eating green crab, which would also help to keep the invading populations under control. Every once in a while on the feed from the ROV, I see some perch. So the little fish that you see swimming around in here, I don't see any right this second, but there's a few off in the distance there. We'll have to get maybe a little closer to be able to see them. But those are perch, definitely. What is the lifespan of a green crab? I believe it's a couple of years. I forget exactly. Oh, and do you remember that one? I want to say maybe 5 years, 3 or 5 years. But the interesting thing about the green crabs has to do with their larvae. So they have a larval stage where they are plankton. They're just really tiny little floating things in the water. You need a microscope to see them. And they actually spend about 90 days as plankton. So 3 months in the water as plankton. And during that time, those larvae can drift around from one location to the next. Well, 3 months, I mean, they could go anywhere. And that's part of the reason why these crabs can spread once they're already here in North America. Now they can travel to other places.
Yeah, green crab's lifespan is 3 to 5 years. And someone else's question was how many times will a crab molt over their lifetime? So it depends on the species. Typically, they'll molt a whole bunch within the first couple of years because they're growing quite rapidly. So, it could be 4, 5, 6 times a year even. And then once they stabilize, it'll be maybe once a year. And what I found out too is that rock crab can get up to 8 years old. So that would mean, the first few years, within the first year, they might even molt monthly because they're metamorphosing a whole bunch until they become full size. And then so after that first couple years, they'll molt annually. I see that Trevor is leaving us. So thank you, Trevor. Thank you for joining. And we'll check back in with you in a while. Chew.
Wonderful. And look at how healthy this eelgrass bed is. There's eelgrass everywhere that we're looking. So that's a really good sign that Sarita Bay has such a healthy eelgrass environment. This is not only habitat for salmon and perch, this would also be habitat for another important type of fish known as herring. And herring are they're a commercially fished species, but they're also a species that are part of the food chain for many other animals out there. So, I think there's another crab down there kind of buried into the sediment, but maybe not a green crab. Hard to tell. That one's buried, but we don't want to get the ROV too close or else we'll disturb the eelgrass. So we have to be a little bit mindful of that. I think we're running a little bit short for time. So let's continue exploring towards the island. And I'm going to ask Owen if he could take the ROV maybe past the eelgrass bed so that we can explore more of the rocky environment just beyond, because we may see some other species there. So far we have some red rock crabs, and some perch and the eelgrass and some unknown crabs. What is the scale that we're seeing on our screen here? Well, I guess eelgrass blades, each blade of eelgrass is about 10 centimeters across. So if that might help you a little bit. Otherwise, there's no magnification or anything. It's just, this is straight underwater what we're seeing. So we're getting out to the edge of the eelgrass bed now. It's not quite as thick as it was where we first saw. And over a little bit further into the distance is an area where it's kind of more a rocky habitat, and eelgrass doesn't grow as well in rocky substrate or rocky bottoms. It needs to have sand or mud sediment in order to establish itself. So we might see slightly different types of species over here. Were there any questions on YouTube, Phil, that I missed? Okay. We have another species of crab, I believe, right there in the center of your screen. This one is definitely still alive. Can you see it moving? I'm trying to get a glimpse of those claws, but it's got them covered in some green seaweed. But I think that's also a red rock crab, personally. I don't think that's a green crab. Still good to see that we have a healthy population of red rock crabs or native crabs here in this area. Looks like we also have some shellfish here. So maybe some oyster shells, excellent food sources for the various types of crabs. And we might even have a sea star in our screen now. Question, are green crabs sensitive to changes in the water, like pH? That's a great question, because the answer is no. They might be a little bit sensitive to pH, but they're not very sensitive to changes in things like salinity or the salt content of the water. And they're also not sensitive to temperature changes in the water. They can tolerate huge variations of temperature over the course of one day, and even over long term. So anywhere from 0 degrees, basically freezing, just above freezing, I guess, all the way up into 30 degrees Celsius, no problem. And for salinity, a crab can tolerate even wider fluctuations than that. So the normal salt content of the ocean around here is usually measured in parts per thousand, and it's usually about 30 parts per thousand in Bamfield or Bamfield area. But a green crab can tolerate fresh water, so 0 parts per thousand salinity, all the way up into the 50 parts per thousand salinity. So huge range. They're capable of surviving in all those conditions, and that's another reason why they're such an invasive species. But I don't actually know the specific impact of what will happen to them if the pH changes. I don't really know how sensitive they are to that. We have some ochre stars here. They're sort of mixed in amongst the oyster shells on the bottom of the ocean, but that's another common species in our intertidal environment. They also eat shellfish, ochre stars do. Lots of different kinds of seaweed.
Questions, Kelly. Do you know if red rock crabs are omnivores?
I'm going to ask Owen that question, actually.
Mainly carnivorous, eh? Yeah.
We think they're carnivorous, yeah. But Owen just mentioned there are some species of crabs that do eat kelp or seaweed. There's one actually that's called a kelp crab, so it definitely feeds on kelp. But a lot of crabs are what we call scavengers. They actually will just eat whatever they can find. They're not especially picky, and that's certainly true for green crabs. Kimberly, is that plankton floating in the water? Yes, it is. There's a lot of debris floating in the water, isn't there? You can see that on the camera from the ROV. So some plankton is microscopic, but when you get a lot of it, then you can actually see it with the naked eye. Oh, there was a longer question there, Phil. I missed that one.
What is the plan to deal with this crab? There'll be a breeding program for the native species. What do you hope to learn from studying the green crab? Yeah, that's actually a long question. Many questions in one. If they are not removing them from the environment, what is the plan? Are you studying and researching their population and effect on the environment? But if things get worse, will there be some sort of intervention?
Right. And so at this point, we are still at the phase where we're trying to determine what the population of green crabs is in Barkley Sound. There's a few locations, like we saw on the INAT map earlier, where we know green crabs exist here. But as for other places, like here in Sarita Bay, we just don't actually know how abundant they are. So the first step is just learning how many green crabs are in the area, and then we can determine what we need to do, if it's trapping them or removing them or breeding other species. Probably not that one. The native species would survive just fine as long as there aren't green crabs in the area. So mostly be removal of the green crabs would be the best strategy for dealing with them. But that's a lot of work to remove every single invasive green crab from a location. Definitely. I saw a different kind of fish for a moment there, which were the pile perch. So another type of perch from the shiner perch we saw earlier. I'm still seeing lots of ochre stars here and there.
I might mention something about Julia's question. I did learn, so sunflower stars are a super endangered species these days, and over in Washington State, there is a breeding program to start to breed some sunflower stars and redisperse in certain areas because they're dropping off like crazy, their number. So there can be intervention. We'll see what happens, right? If green crabs, there are sometimes some collections of green crabs happening, and the government is monitoring the situation. But and for the most, so no intervention right now with those ones, but we may see some intervention in the future.
Excellent. And I should point out, if you are observing here from home and you are seeing these sea stars on your screen, you can be taking screenshots and putting those into iNaturalist, because iNaturalist has lots of other projects on the go, and one of them is tracking sea star wasting disease. So take a picture of any sea stars you see, whether they are wasting or if they're healthy, it doesn't matter. There's an organization of people that are keeping tabs on how the sea stars are doing out there. So that's really helpful information for us to see. That, for instance, on the screen right there, that ochre star looks nice and healthy, nice purple ochre star. And there I've even given away the sample species name for you, ochre star. Owen says there's a different species to the left. I don't see that one yet. Oh, there's a very small, maybe leather star up there as well. So different species of sea star. Two in one go. Wonderful.
Just touch on a question from Sarah. She's asking, what adaptations do green crabs have that make them so dangerous? Well, I guess it's basically how generalized they are with their diet. Like they'll eat anything and just keep eating things. And as far as red rock crab killing them, have you ever seen them attack each other?
I bet they would if they were in the same environment. Yeah. Yeah. And there was some research done by some undergrad students at the Bamfield Marine Sciences Center a couple of years back. They were doing an undergrad course, and then they managed to publish their results after their course finished. And so those students, Emlim and Nick Enns, they were studying green crabs and red rock crabs and the relationship between the two of them. They determined that if you provide an abundance of oysters for both types of crabs, the red rock crabs will eat those oysters, and because they're bigger and they can crack into them faster, they eat more than the green crabs will. But relative to their size, the green crabs will actually eat more oysters. And another interesting finding was that the green crabs would eat oysters even if they were at a low density. So if there wasn't very much food available, the green crabs would still go for it and they'd eat it all. Whereas the red rock crabs, if there wasn't much food available, would just leave it and search for other food sources instead. So it just goes to show that those green crabs are just so hungry and such vicious predators, wanting to eat everything in their path, which could be a problem for Shellfish, especially if species of shellfish are maybe struggling a little bit due to other reasons. So if green crabs are there, definitely going to affect those populations. So I think it's time for us to bring our ROV back to the boat, and it's soon time for us to sign off. So maybe time for one or two quick more questions. But if you think of something later, or I didn't get to your question over the course of this show, you can always contact us after the fact, and we'll be happy to answer your questions that way. You can find us on social media, or if you go to our website bamfieldmsc.com, then you can find our contact info and you can reach us that way as well. There's a question, do green crabs ever pick fights with lobsters? The answer to that is not here in British Columbia, because we actually don't have lobsters in our waters of British Columbia. That's an Atlantic Ocean species, but not found here in the Pacific. The ROV is now coming back to the boat. There it is. It's waving to us. There you have it. So we did not encounter any invasive European green crabs here in Sarita Bay. And you know what? That's actually a really good thing. So I'd like to thank you so much for watching. Thank you also to our sponsors, NSERC Promo Science, for donating the funding to make this show possible for you. And of course, to my team here on the boat for helping drive the ROV, pull in crab traps, answer all these questions. So good. That's some impressive driving skills, Owen, from Krista. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to hear from you again soon as we continue green crab patrol in other parts of Barkley Sound. Bye for now.
Yep. I'll mention, check out our website, bamfieldmsc.com, where you can find out more about our live shows as well.